wrapping it up, and that sort of confirms some of the stuff we've been reporting earlier. And he's wrapping it up with witness testimony. And it looks like the last ones, or among the last testimony, take Trump out of it because that could get tied up in Supreme Court land and never happen, or maybe will happen soon, is Roger Stone, his former political advisor. We understand, I spoke with Roger over the weekend. He has told me his retained counsel. He has not been called yet, but from what our sources close to the probe are saying is that he's likely to be among the last of the Mohegans here, the last of the witnesses before Mueller at least wraps up the witness side of the.
So no one else's office or home is to be ransacked.
Well, you never know what they find, but and who. By the way, the office was ransacked by the FBI on the orders of the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District from referral from Mueller.
But who's telling you that they get a sense that it's
the lawyers that are representing others that know about what's going on in the Mueller probe, that are speaking with the Mueller people, are saying that the witness side is basically wrapping up, and it's Stone who is the last of the Mohegans there, among the last. Now, we should point out, why do they want to talk to Roger Stone? I can only tell you based on what witnesses have been asked about Stone, the former political advisor. I have to admit, I've known Roger for a long time. I consider him a friend, decent guy. You know, maybe that puts me on the outs around here, but you do get friendly with some of your...
Believe me, your friendships have nothing to do.
Good point. That's the least of my worries, right?
Charlie, I want to ask let me just make people on TV. This is not a smart move.
Let me just make my point here, and we can delve into that. Roger has said in the past, he's talked about WikiLeaks, and in a way that people assume that he was helping Julian Assange and maybe Guccifer, .2, whatever the guy's name was,
remember that?
hack into the DNC emails.
Yeah.
He has said things. I should point out, Rogers told me no, and there's no evidence of that. It's very little evidence he's connected with anybody connected with that is basically a witness. A lot of people say Rick Gates. You know, they're investigating whether his contacts with Rick Gates. Again, Roger tells me they met once. Listen, Roger talks a good game, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
He's a political dirt digger, right?
Yes,
you know him. He's a tough guy. I never know him to do anything stupid.
All right, so let's say, what do you make of that, Nola, if it is wrapping up or could be perceived to be wrapping up? What do you think?
Well, first of all, I'd like to ask all of you guys, why are all these people on an ongoing investigation going out on national television?
Roger doesn't care.
He doesn't care.
Roger Stone is, I mean, you're talking about a guy that...
don't you think this is going to lead to something else? This really has nothing to do with Stormy Daniels.
Unfortunately, it's being played out in the media right now. You know, and it's one side doing it, so the other side has to
Roger also has a book to sell.
Well, but you know what?
Everyone has a book to sell.
This is not about collusion. This thing has started out with collusion, but you know what they're doing.
But
they're gunning for
Trump. They don't go this way. But you mentioned something interesting, Mike, just to follow up, and I do want to follow up with that. If you knew that this was going to be wrapped up sooner rather than later, and it depends how it's wrapped up, of course, to Charlie's point, wouldn't markets kind of welcome that uncertainty out of the way?
Absolutely. I think earnings season came in as strong as we had wanted it, or as strong as people anticipated. We have 18% growth. But this has been a dark cloud over the market, over the economy, over the country, because regardless of which side you're on, a major investigation or impeachment of the president, if it goes a step further, is negative for the market.
And you know what I love about your colleagues? I mean, they're not red or blue. I don't exaggerate when I say they're about green. They're about keeping the green flowing, and that's why they were against seeing Bill Clinton kicked out, because at the time the markets, the economy was thriving, and the last thing I wanted that was disrupted, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think maybe a little bit of credit goes to our mayor, Rudy Giuliani, who came on a week or two ago and said this is going to be wrapped up in a few weeks.
I don't think it's going to be. I think he was a little too Pollyannish about the few. I think he said 2 weeks, and the 2 weeks was over, I think, on Friday. I could be wrong about that.
I don't think the markets know what to wish for or what to fear.
See, I think the real issue now, I think, is how long is it going to take for Trump either to give or not give his testimony. That's one issue. The other issue,
but you're taking it, would it be a mistake if he didn't?
I think he's got to do it.
He's not going to do it because, number one, he would be a fool to get before
Some are saying he has to do it. I'm not a lawyer.
I think that's why you had that impeachment lawyer there.
Do you think that would be a mistake if he didn't?
I think it would be a mistake if he did. I think he has nothing to gain by testifying, and I don't believe he does have to testify.
Here's what they have to do, and I think this is what Rudy's trying to do. Rudy Giuliani, the former mayor, is now his senior counsel. We should point out that in these, when Mueller's people are taking witness testimony, it divides in half between the notion of obstruction through the questions and collusion. So he's asking the witnesses, it's not just all obstruction. He's asking both sides. anybody knows, if you know the prosecution of Martha Stewart, which I did a lot of reporting on back in the day when James Comey was the one who brought the case against her, is that she volunteered to go see the Securities and Exchange Commission over a suspicious trade. And she went in there, and she concocted a story which the jury believed was a lie, and she obstructed justice. If she didn't do that, let's just point out, now why did she do that? She did that because she was the CEO of a publicly traded company. If she didn't do that, they were going to roast her for it. It was an optics problem. So you win, you lose either way. And I think that's the problem.
But I agree with Mike that you have more to lose talking than not.
Well, Trump says he's fine to sit down with Mueller.
Yeah, well, of course he is. Of course he is. But I think to Mike's point, I mean, I think that's a zero-sum game.
But if you don't do it, don't you look guilty?
I don't think so, and I think that's why the law is in place that way, that the sitting president could take the fifth and wouldn't have to testify now.
Well, fine legal minds are disagreeing with that premise, that if subpoenaed, he has to. Now, I don't know if that's true, but I fully agree with you that whether you like the president or not, that is a slippery path, and I think he could talk himself right into perjury, unintentionally or intentionally.
I know, but Neil, this is the problem, and I think this is why they hired Rudy. They have to now do a public relations blitz on
why? Why do they have to talk about it?
Because they know they know that this is what people close to Rudy are telling me. They believe that the only case they have, the strongest case, I'm not saying you can't make something out of Don Jr. meeting with that Russian person, right? Remember the thing in Trump Tower? It seems pretty picayune, right? But they believe the strongest thing he's got is the cover-up rather than the crime. And, you know, that said, if you don't answer the questions from a political standpoint, could you imagine if he took the fifth and he's running for president again?
But I don't think it's about
He doesn't have to take the fifth. He just doesn't have to take the questions, period. But I understand what you're saying. But let me ask you this. I mean, I think given the market's movements, that they have moved past this thinking that it's not going to hit the president. It might hit some of the people around him, but it won't hit the president. If that were the case, then is it just a green light for the market to continue its run up? I'm sure they'll pounce on the next concern like tariffs and all that, but what do you think?
Yeah, so I think once that gets out of the way, if you can take this Mueller probe off the table, I think the market has a lot of catching up to do because we're basically flat for the year after some very strong economic numbers, after a tax cut. So I think the market...
You don't think a comeuppance is due even with this because we've had... Well, the year notwithstanding, it's been a hell of a run-up.
Yeah, it's been very volatile. Well, last year was a great run-up. Earlier this year was. And then we had this kind of a correction, if you will. But I think the Mueller probe is the biggest thing weighing on the markets right now because the underlying economy supports a higher market.
Mueller probe adds to the volatility. I think we can all say that. I think the biggest thing hanging over the markets right now is trade.
Look, let's turn to the House Intelligence Committee and what's going on between the DOJ and Devin Nunes. He issued a threat to Attorney General Jeff Sessions yesterday, outlining consequences if Sessions does not comply with a subpoena investigating alleged surveillance abuses at the Justice Department. Here's what the congressman said on Fox and Friends yesterday.
2 weeks ago, we sent a letter to Attorney General Jeff Sessions, a classified letter. Per usual, it was ignored, not acknowledged, just completely ignored. So last week we sent a subpoena, and then on Thursday we discovered that they are not going to comply with our subpoena. The only thing left that we can do is we have to move quickly to hold the Attorney General of the United States in contempt.
Now, the Department of Justice fought back, saying that it did respond to Congressman Nunes with a letter last Thursday, and that letter reads this, in part. The department has determined that, consistent with applicable law and longstanding executive branch policy, it is not in a position to provide information responsive to your request regarding a specific individual. So, yeah, I mean, everything that Devin Nunes said was right, that they responded on Thursday, but on Thursday they said we're not going to comply.
Yeah, you know, this is so tricky because on the one hand, you really do have a Justice Department responsibility to make sure our prosecutions are able to go through without being unduly influenced. On the other hand, Justice Department's responsible to Congress, so I hope this gets settled in a negotiation. But what Congress is saying basically is they've run out of patience and they don't have any tools to comply. Good behavior from an executive branch, so they have very blunt tools, and that's what they have to use.
Yeah.
Every time Congress asks for something from DOJ, just to your point, that when the news finally comes, when something's finally provided, it turns out to be bad news for the DOJ. It looks like this repeated, like we just don't want to give you anything because we don't have anything with us that's going to make us look good. We're going to look bad in this.
Well, right, like one redaction was about Lisa Page saying to saying to Peter Strzok, oh, go to the party and, go talk to Judge Contreras. It's not a conflict of interest. Judge Contreras was the FISA judge.
Right.
And that was redacted.
Yeah, the redactions are becoming...
That's not national security.
No,
right, yeah.
they're protect images and
nothing to do with keeping
reputations.
us safe.
And that's a bureaucracy-wide problem. And what's surprising, though, is that people at the top, the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General, are listening to the bureaucrats underneath them instead of being outsiders enforcing good behavior in their agencies.
Well, that's really an important point, and I want to drill down on that a bit. I don't understand. This is Donald Trump's Department of Justice,
Yeah.
we thought. And they're fighting with the Congress who's overseeing them. They don't want to show... What are they hiding?
It tells you the power of bureaucracy. That's where the redactions are done. The Attorney General doesn't sit there with a black marker. It's people underneath.
But shouldn't Rosenstein or Sessions say, look, unredact and send them the darn documents?
But this is what it takes. And for them to put in the time, the effort, the energy to fight the bureaucracy really requires outsiders thinking. Bureaucracies have tremendous sway and power because of exactly these type of issues. You have to have the people at top decide, I'm going to take them on. And it's not just this issue. You have to take them on a host of issues, so they pick and choose.
Meanwhile, somebody is trying to take on Robert Mueller right now, the judge on Friday. The very latest in terms of the special counsel, Robert Mueller, a former personal attorney for President Trump, says that the president will not sit down for an interview with Mueller, saying this is no longer a, quote, good faith investigation. The president tweeted about this about 30 minutes ago. He says this: the Russia witch hunt is rapidly losing credibility. House Intelligence Committee found no collusion, no coordination or anything else with Russia. So now the probe says, OK, what else is there? How about obstruction for a made up phony crime? There is no obstruction. It's called